Honorable Chairperson and Patron of Sub-Himalayan Research Institute, respected Chair, panelists, guests and audiences of two evenings program, Secretary, other office bearers and honorable members of SRI and sister organizations, a very good evening to you all. I welcome you all to evening's discussion program on the book Light Unto a Cell, edited by Professor Manish Sinha and organized by Sub-Himalayan Research Institute. First of all, I would like to devote few words for today's host. Sub-Himalayan Research Institute, also popularly known as SRI, headquartered in Purnia, is dedicated to research, discourses, education and general welfare of people, society and culture in Sub-Himalayan region. A multidimensional institute, SRI formulates ideas, undertakes empirical studies, theorizes and disseminates knowledge through research, seminars, webinars, lectures, training, workshops and publications. Founded in late 2018, the institute has accomplished more than 4.5 years of its voyage. Despite the difficulties and challenges the world has faced in these years, SRI has been able to take up various activities involving research, trainings and workshops, research projects, research affiliation programs, innovating scientific equipments for local farmers, development dialogue series, memorial lectures, national and international webinars and conferences, including the last one hosted in April 2023, development dialogues, debates and discussions, and supporting just movement for development of sub-Himalayan region, etc. We would like to inform that numerous distinguished personalities who have achieved tremendously in their field of work across the globe have come on SRI's platform in different ways in these years. The Institute intends to take up more such activities in days ahead. Now I would like to present the highlights of today's program. To evening, we have Professor Ratneshwar Mishra as Chair, Professor Manish Sinha as the presenter, Professor Rashmi Chandra, Dr. Pradeep Kant Chaudhary, Dr. Mohammad Sajjad, and Engineer Rajesh Chandra Mishra as eminent panelists. First, Professor Manish will reflect on his book, which is the focus of two evenings discussion program.
Shall I begin?
No, sir. Still, we have some time. It will be followed by comments from panelists such as Professor Chandra, Dr. Chaudhary, and Dr. Sajjad. Thereafter, we would have an open question and answer session. It would be followed by Manishji's answers to the queries. Then the chair of the program, Professor Mishra, would enlighten us with his words. The program will end up with a vote of thanks from Engineer Rajesh Chandra Mishra, the Secretary of SRI. Now, I would like to say a few words for the editor of the book under discussion today. Professor Manish Sinha is a distinguished historian with more than 2.5 decades of teaching and research experience. His areas of research are modern India, international relations, and diasporic studies. Professor Sinha has authored 2 books and has dozens of publications in national and international journals. He has participated and organized several national and international seminars successfully. Manish is a member of various academic prestigious bodies like ISC, IIPA, Indian Society of Buddhist Studies, and INTEC. At present, he is serving at Department of History, Magad University, and also as the convener of INTEC Gaya chapter. One of the distinguished panelists on board today is Professor Rashmi Chandra. She has an illustrious academic career with wide teaching and research experience. Her research interests are in the field of political theory, normative and critical legal theory, and Indian constitutional law. Professor Chandra has authored 3 books, including the last one titled as Competing Nationalism, The Sacred and Political Life of Jagat Narayan Lal, the man under discussion today, and several research articles published in leading national and international journals. She also is a political commentator and writes regularly for newspapers and news portals. Presently, ma'am is serving as Professor of Political Science at Janki Devi Memorial College, University of Delhi. Another eminent discussant on our board today is Dr. Pradeep Kant Chaudhary. He has taught almost for 2.5 decades at Ramlal Anand College and Deswandu College, University of Delhi, before taking VRS. Dr. Chaudhary's research work, Rama Within Acts, Myth and Cult of Parasuram Avatar, has been published as book. He has worked upon Gram Devtao and Kul Devtao of North Bihar as Senior Fellow of ICHR. At present, sir is engaged in social work and independent research activities through Samparti Anadi Foundation. Another distinguished discussant on today's panel is Dr. Mohammad Sajjad. Dr. Sajjad has wide teaching, academic, and administrative experience. He is associated with several prestigious institutions within and outside the country. His research interest is late colonial politics and Bihar Muslims, etc. Dr. Sajjad has produced several books written in English and Urdu, dozens of articles which are published in refereed and peer-reviewed journals and national and international newspapers. He has received numerous awards. Presently, sir is working at Center of Advanced Study in History, Aligarh Muslim University. You all are welcome on board, sir. Now, before
the book is very significant and very topical, though was written way back in 1946. I will be making my comments on the book and on the speakers that will come forward later. But right now, I must say that this book gives me an idea of what Indian freedom movement had been and what it is being turned into. Though I will not go in details of those things, as you know, things are not very smooth in expressing yourself. But I was wonderstruck the way Shri Jagat Narayan Lal, remaining true to his creed, committed to the imagination of Hindu state, and yet having some other idea about India, having some other idea even for Hindus. That is remarkable. We will be talking about that. But before that, I must first listen to Manishji and all other panelists who must be able to give us better and greater light about the book and all the thing, particularly as Ruchi Shri ji said, that she is political analyst. And this book must be analyzed. It has not been analyzed as properly and as widely as it should have been. So let us say if this discussion brings out something better about this book, as I have imagined.
This is the autobiography of the protagonist, Jagat Narayan Lal. He was one of the most prominent freedom fighters from Bihar, being imprisoned for more than 8 years during the freedom movement. And here, this book is based on his experiences on his prison life when he was in the jail and when he is out of prison. Now, this book oscillates between his spiritual experiences inside the jail and his political, public, and family life outside the jail. And like a master craftsman, he has blended these two in a most fascinating and interesting journey. Once you begin this book, and the book is so fast paced. This book has been divided into 18 chapters. They are very small chapters, but each represents a very important episode of his life. Now, as an editor, where do I fit in? Jagat Narayan Lal, I have a family connection with Jagat Narayan Lal as Professor Ashri Chandra has. He was my maternal grandfather. And we used to hear about him a lot during the family days, but no work was done. Now, I used to see references here and there about Light unto Herself, but I never got hold of a copy. One day, a researcher, he brought a handwritten copy from which was in the possession of one of my Mossas, and I saw that book. But the published version I saw only when I was researching at Nehru Memorial Library. I discussed it with Rashmi also, and she also got a copy later on from her father. And then what interested me was that I got some family papers from one of my uncles, and the book as well as those papers. And then we discovered that we also didn't know that there was the Jagat Narayan Lal paper section at Nehru Memorial Library, which Ram Pyari Devi, my nani, and the wife of Jagat Narayan Lal, she had the vision to deposit those priceless collections after his death on 3rd of December 1966. Now suddenly it unfolded. This is a man about whom much should be written, much should be known. And I started working on him gradually, a lot in Bihar, a lot of conferences, a lot of places I was discussing him. Then it came to my mind that with the tremendous volumes of his writings, and this book is not known. This is the book from his pen. We can do analyses and we can write commentaries. But what he has written, this book should be before the public. The only print which I had got hold of, that was in the Nehru Memorial Library. University of Columbia had digitalized it. So in 2019, I published a second edition, but it was we had to rush. And what I did was that I introduced I wrote the biography of Jagat Narayan Lal, and from his writings, I tried to enrich it with a good appendix section. Then I have made some alterations in the appendix section, tried to enrich it, but I have not touched the autobiography, which no one should do, because how can you make changes to an autobiography? Now, this book is a most fascinating and interesting account of the main protagonist, Jagat Narayan Lal. And this book begins with the description of the beginning of his prison journey, jail journey, when he is arrested in November 1921 for opposing the visit of the Prince of Wales at Patna. And then he is put at Patna jail. From there, a lot of people coming to meet him. And so he writes that the jail authorities suddenly might have got apprehensive, but he doesn't clearly say it. But suddenly one day, after 3 or 4 days, in the morning, they are shifted to Buxar jail. And he was of a spiritual bent of mind. He says that as I was going on the train journey, a feeling of renunciation, it pervaded me. And when he arrived at Buxar Central Jail, he gave one of his most prized possessions, a wristwatch, which he never used to part with, to one of his acquaintances who had come to meet him. And then the book shifts to Buxar Jail, where he is going to spend 6 months at Buxar Jail. Now, the title of this book, Light into a Cell, is inspired, you can say, by the light which he experienced during his spiritual experiences in his jail. So, at Buxar Jail, he got immersed in the day-to-day activities, and he described that in his fellow prisoner was Khurshid Hasnan Khan, a noted freedom fighter of Bihar, who used to sing melodiously. He got hold of some books, like a book of Swami Ram Tir, and then he got Lokman Tilak's Gita Rahasya. And he says that he was fascinated by the lectures of Swami Ram Tir, written in Hindi, and on Om Pranav, the master, the master sound, the master syllable around which this whole universe, as he said, has been created. And he says that I started witnessing a transformation creeping in from being a youth. He was quite young, full of vigor, and believing that one can do everything. And suddenly a feeling of renunciation, it was engulfing him. Now, the next phase, and in the beginning itself, when he writes the introductory of the book, I forgot to mention it, he writes a very beautiful, he was a, he had a very good command over Hindi as well as English. He writes that I have sacrificed so much. I lost my beloved ones, my wife, my child. And he says, but the ever beckoning light of freedom, it beckons to traverse the thorny path. So it is beautiful when you read the book, the introductory section. Now the book moves on through the various phases, and as you go through the various phases, then the next phase, which is corresponds to chapter 3, here that is all about his journey from Patna jail to Buxar jail, and then here he describes that he has a tiff with the IG prisons. The IG prison had come to the jail, and he was on his round. He was wrenching open the mouth of the prisoners to see their teeth. Now that was, very humiliating. And then a political prisoner, he was dragged out of the cell. So Jagat Narayan Lal, or we can call him JNL, he wrote a note of protest, and he organized the prisoners, and the prisoners were warned by the jail warden that, look, if you carry on this conduct, we will take out all your privileges. So they decided that the general organized the prisoners, and they also said, okay, we are ready to give renounce all the privileges. And and they said that we are Gandhians. The general said that we are Gandhians, and privileges are nothing for us. And then what happened was that in the prison every day there used to be arguments between the prisoners and the jail staff, the wardens. The jail wardens, they wanted to put the prisoners early. Now the prisoners, they did not want to be packed out in the cell. So every day this was the same case. Now one another day there was a very heavy argument. Generally, that we will get you locked with the sweeper. Then said that the general quipped that look, as a Gandhian, I don't see any difference as to the jail between you and a sweeper. And the next evening, a messenger came, and he said that the jailer has called you. When he went to meet him, then he was served a sentence that was humiliating the jail warden. You are being served a sentence of solitary confinement of 1 year. Warden then said that we will get you locked with the sweeper. Then said that the general quipped that look, as a Gandhian, I don't see any difference. Dr. Pune's treatment, he was suffering from dysentery. So he talks about it also, his travails, but that is not overwhelming him. Now he says that when I was reading the Gita Rahasya, so I was particularly fascinated by the chapter Sthir Pragya. And when later on I was released from prison, and I came to know that it was Gandhiji's favorite chapter, so I was thrilled. And again, what happened was that his prison cell, for no valid reason, IG prison came one day, and he was again, this prison term was extended for 1 more month. So all this term, it had of course, it was spent in, he writes about the spiritual experiences, and he somehow sustained this cell life, and in contemplation, in meditation. And when he was released ultimately, so he was, a man who was quite disoriented. He had taken a vow that he would not be lead an ordinary life. He will practice brahmacharya, parigraha, and if he had to go for 3 kilometers, he would walk rather than take a conveyance. Even when he was released from the Buxar jail, then to the Congress office, he walked on his foot. When he went to Patna, then he didn't take a conveyance. He went to Guljar Bagh office, and the people were there at the railway station to welcome him, but he walked on foot. And the next morning, the first thing he went to Sadakat Ashram to meet the learned and the most revered Majrul Haq, who had founded the Sadakat Ashram. As Jagat Babu was also a professor of economics at the Bihar Vidyapith, which had been founded by Majrul Haq. Majrul Haq was very much pained to see his condition, and he wrote a stringent article in his weekly, The Motherland, that look what the authorities have done to him. He has come out as a mental and a physical wreck. Now he is describing the life just after his release. Now he describes many things. He goes to meet his father. There also, his father was a station master at Bakhtiyarpur. But one station before he gets down from the train, he gives some money to his father to bring envelopes. So he was acting in a sort of, you can say, a weird way. He had some his own the spiritual experiences he had, and all those things. So that had he was a changed man. But he went to meet his wife at Gorakhpur. There also, he says that he was honest to hear that my wife tried to come near me, but I shrugged her off. We slept on separate beds. So this is not only a life of a political prisoner, a common man, a spiritual prisoner. So it is very interesting, And then again, in the next chapter, he describes his return to normal life. Now again, he joins as professor of economics at the Bihar Vidyapeeth, and he mentions that he goes for a meeting to Ahmedabad All India Congress Committee, and he had put up an engagement with Mahatma Gandhi at Sabarmati. But he says that Mahatma Ji was so exhausted that when I got the opportunity, so I was sitting near him, so he just left off. So I couldn't discuss with him. Then in the meanwhile, this the next chapter which shifts is he talks about the Gaya Congress. Now that is a very important political episode which he witnessed, or of which he was a very active participant. Gaya Congress, he was assistant secretary of Pradesh Congress Committee, president of Patna City Congress Committee, and then as we all know, that just for the background for the audience, that when this Congress session used to be held side by side, all the major organizations used to conduct their sessions. Now, Gaya Congress had a background during the Gaya Congress, a very momentous Hindu Mahasabha session was organized. Now, the Jagat Narayan Lal played a very important part in the organization of the Hindu Mahasabha session. Now, the background, as you will read this book, that this Hindu Mahasabha session, in fact, was initiated by the Shankaracharya of Sharda Peeth, Swami Bharti Krishna Tirth Ji. So he wanted to create a Sangathan, and Hindu Mahasabha had not been a representative organization. Now he participates, he organizes that session also, and it is here that he comes into contact with Madan Mohan Malviya. Now Madan Mohan Malviya is also one of his political mentors, like Lala Lajpat Rai, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. And Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the chairman of the reception committee at the Hindu Mahasabha. And in fact, in his Atam Katha also, Dr. Rajendra Prasad said that it was normal, as the students of history will be knowing, that during that time, the dual membership was perfectly valid. And communalism, as is being was viewed later on, or as is interpreted today, cannot be contextualized in the same way yesterday. So, anyway, I am not going to give you a commentary on that. So, after the Gaya Congress, he became very active in public life, and we find that he attends the momentous Banaras session. He talks about it. A momentous Banaras session of the Hindu Mahasabha president was Madan Mohan Malviya. And then the scene moves to, he becomes the secretary of the provincial Hindu Mahasabha also. And Rajendra Babu was in fact the executive committee member of the All India Hindu Mahasabha, as well as the most important leader of the Congress. So all these people were straddling two boats anyway. And there was not much of a contradiction at this point of time, but this contradiction is going to surface later on, not very far off. Then in 1925, we find that at Calcutta, Hindu Mahasabha, he talks about in his book, session is organized, where Jagat Babu is appointed as he is nominated as the General Secretary of the All India Hindu Mahasabha, and Lala Lajpat Rai is the president. And later on, he in 1926, basically Jagat Narayan Lal is very much, concerned with Hindu Sangathan and the reforms in the Hindu religion. So he is more, his orientation is more towards it, rather than the political aspect of the Hindu politics, you can say. No, it is just a minute. Now it is during this period that he founds the Mahavir Weekly, and it was the Mahavir Weekly was a periodical. Every week used to come. He became the editor, and the Mahavir. There is a very important sedition case associated with Mahavir, about which I shall be talking about. But before that, I will be talking about an internal dilemma of Jagat Narayan Lal, which was very quick to surface in 1926 itself. In 1926, the elections to the state assemblies and the Imperial Legislative Council, the Central Assembly, were to be held. Now, the Congress had been divided into many factions, and Madan Mohan Malviya at Delhi, there was all parties conference in September. So he had to organize a conference over there, and Jagat Babu ultimately didn't stand on the Congress ticket because he wanted to raise the question of Hindu temple reforms in the assembly, and he thought that being in the Congress will constrain him. So, in fact, I discussed it with Malviya ji, and when he comes back, he stands on the ticket of the Independent Congress Party founded by Lala Lajpat Rai, and he wins that election. And he is elected to the Bihar Legislative Council, and the prime motive was to introduce a bill related to the Hindu temple endowment act. However, that bill could never see the light of the day. Now let us come back to the Mahavir episode. In 1928, Jagat Babu as the editor, this was the time when communal discord had reached very evil proportions. Particularly after the non-cooperation movement, there was a political lull, and all the vociferous tendencies, they were on the fore. So Jagat Babu wrote a very stringent article in the Mahavir. The focus was that it is the government which is creating these divisions, the Hindu-Muslim divisions. In this book, though it has not been elaborated much, but from his papers, when we go deeply, then we get a better understanding about it. But this, and he was sentenced to 1 year imprisonment, which he underwent at Hazaribagh jail. Now, this Mahavir sedition case became a very famous case because the conduct of the Chief Justice of Patna High Court, his name was Mr. Putni, it was not deserving of a judicial, of a judge of such a prestigious High Court or of any High Court. Now, the wording of the judgment, it created a lot of indignation all over India. Jagat Babu was described as a silly little man, and writing a silly little article. Now, Babu Shri Krishna Sinha fought his case, and then the Searchlight on 29th of August, Babu Murli Manohar Prasad was the editor. He wrote a very stringent article against the judgment given by the Chief Justice Putni, in which he lambasted the Chief Justice. And this has become the order of the day. And Babu Murli Manohar Prasad was fined 500 and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. And for fighting the case, he writes in this book that Motilal Nehru came here. Then I think it was Tej Bahadur Sapru, he was here. And they all came here to fight the case of Babu Murli Manohar Prasad. In 29, again, he was released from jail. So I have in the appendix section, I have added that editorial in the Searchlight, which Babu Murli Manohar Prasad wrote, and also I have added an editorial in the Modern Review. The Modern Review Lala Lajpat Rai also was very critical. I think it was Lala Rai, maybe I am a little confused, but the Modern Review was also very critical of that judgment. So I have produced that in the appendix, so that when the person when the reader of this book studies that sedition case, so he will get a better understanding about it. That addition in the appendix should have complemented. So in 1929, he is released. Again, what happens is that now while he is in the prison, his wife, he dies, and she dies, on 13th of December. So but he gets the news on 26th of December, when a fellow prisoner got a copy of the Statesman, and he had small children. She was his first wife. She suffered from tuberculosis. Later on, he writes that she wasted away in my absence. And so, but he was very, shell shocked. Didn't know what to do. And when you are in solitude, you think about so many things. He was grieved also. Then he was also thinking that maybe it is for the good. Now I have no worldly attachments. Then he walks out of the prison. And again, when you come into the public life, then again you have got children to care for. Now again the pull of the Grihastha Jivan. Now this is the setting of the marriage after his release in 1929, and he gets married to Ram Pyari Devi. She was my nani, and she was the sister of Babu Sukhdev Prasad of Motihari. And he said that I was so, or that is also very touching. He describes that he was so embarrassed when he goes as a Bharati, and this was his second marriage, and he locked himself in the room so that he could come over his emotions. And he said that all along I wanted that I should have a robust companion who can look after my children and who can give me company during my political struggle. And Ram Pyari Devi ably did that. And in 1930, when Jagat Babu again went to prison during the Savinay Bhagya disobedience movement, Ram Pyari Devi, she jumped into the fray and she was arrested at Khatri Sarai, and lifelong she was her companion. She was also, later on, she also became the chairman of the Bihar Legislative Council. Look at anyway. Then again, he plunges into active politics. He goes to AICC sessions. And in 1929, he describes in his books that he goes to the historic Lahore Congress, where Jawaharlal Nehru unfurls the national flag. And then they all come back. And the decision is 26th of January, they all take a pledge to renounce everything for the nation. And then a decision is taken. He writes, all these things are mentioned in the book, that everybody should resign from the office. Now, again, there is a big dilemma. He writes about it. Now, this dilemma is again that whether he should resign or not. He writes that, look, I was not elected on the Congress ticket. And if I resign, then again, who will push forward the Hindu Temple Endowment Bill? That was very dear to him. It was about the temple reforms from the clutches of the corrupt Mahants. And did not resign. So he says, he says that in the press also, he was in the Congress circles, he was criticized that you have not resigned, but he gives these reasons. And he says that I had taken a vow that as soon as Mahatma Gandhi will start the Satyagraha, so I will plunge in. That is what he does. Then the book shifts to his prison term during the Savinay Bhagya Andolan, during the Irwin compromise. He comes out. Then again he is imprisoned. And this is a very important episode in his life, because during this period, again this dilemma of a Hindu Mahasabha or the Congress, it creeps in. Now I discovered a letter written by him from Hazaribagh Central Jail from March 1932 to Dr. B.S. Munje. Dr. B.S. Munje, he was president of the Hindu Mahasabha for 7 years, and he was the mentor of Dr. Keshav Balram Hegdewar, also the founder of RSS. Now, in this letter, he says that when I joined the Hindu Mahasabha, we didn't know that it would become like another Muslim league, opposing the Congress on each and every question. And B.S. Munje से उनका जो कन्वर्सेशन चल रहा है वो इसलिए है कि बीएस मुंजे चाहते हैं कि वो हिंदुस्तान सेवा संघ, हिंदू सेवा HSS करके एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनाना चाह रहे हैं, और हिंदू सेवा संघ करके, एंड ही वांट्स जगत नारायण लाल कि आप उसके मेंबर बन जाए. तो ही सेज कि नहीं, HSS जो है वो उसको अपॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन रखिए, और हमारे जैसे लोगों को आप छोड़ दीजिए अपना पॉलिटिकल वर्क करने के लिए. नहीं तो एक समय ऐसा आएगा where we might choose one organization or the other, और जो मेरा जिसके लिए मैंने सैक्रिफाइस किया है, तो माई इंक्लिनेशन इज मोर टुवर्ड्स द कांग्रेस. फिर 1934 के एपिसोड का 1934, दैट इज अ जर्नी, यू नो, द सेवरल चैप्टर्स दे आर डीलिंग विद इट. So 1934, he discusses the earthquake. Then he talks about how he stands on the ticket of Nationalist Congress Party founded by Madan Mohan Malviya, but broken away from the Congress because of the communal award. He forfeits his deposit, defeated by Babu Narayan Singh. Again in 1937, he again rejoins the Congress. Now there is a, you know, irony. He in the elections he defeats now the Hindu Mahasabha candidate who forfeits the his deposit. Then in 1937, he talks about the office, and he says कि as soon he talks about his office experience, but he comments that office also had a very, you know, debilitating impact upon the
Manish ji,
people
may I
who were
request
already in
you
the
to
freedom struggle.
conclude it?
And then as we move on, the book finishes towards his individual civil disobedience movement and his spiritual.
Description. I think the entire book has been almost faithfully reproduced before us, the way he put the events and other things. Now we will request other panelists to shed light on how they view this biography, autobiography. Please, Ramanji.
Now, on behalf of Chair, I request Professor Asri Chandra to say her point of view. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Manish, for laying out the book so clearly and lucidly. It was almost like reading Life Unto a Cell, chapter by chapter with you. Thank you, Raman, for inviting me and giving me this platform. Thank you, Professor Ratneshwar Mishra, for chairing the session and being with us. And thank you, other panelists, and welcome to the guests who are here. Let me, what I'm going to do is actually, since Manish has already laid out what the book is, I will try and read the book in the context of both his other writings and in the context of how I interpret it. Let me begin by two things that Manish mentioned, or two phrases he used to describe Jagat Narayan Lal. And there's a reason why I'm beginning with them, because I disagree with both of them. All right, respectfully disagree. One word that you used was that he had many allegiances, he had many loyalties, and like a quote-unquote master craftsman, he navigated those multiple.
No, I said that he was a master how he wrote the book. That is what I said, not allegiance. Didn't talk about allegiances.
All right, okay, never mind. The other was there's a reason why I'm referring these two terms. The other was that when he comes out of the Buxar jail in 1921, he has taken many vows of brahmacharya, of not eating salt for 6 months, of not getting onto a four-wheeler within a certain radius. He does appear to be disoriented. He does appear to be, so the word used was disoriented. He does appear to be slightly, जिसे हम कहते हैं बहका हुआ. But, you know, there was a moment of epiphany while he was in the jail, and he felt that he was trying to connect to a higher form of consciousness, which brings me to the central core thread that runs through Life Unto a Cell. There is a thread of renunciation and suffering, unmistakable thread of renunciation, of wanting to give up worldly pleasures, of renouncing domesticity, of renouncing sometimes even politics, because they seem to be geared to a smaller, more baser instinct of man. and the other is constantly trying to achieve a kind of higher consciousness. And to me, this seems that Jagat Narayan Lal was asking a simple question. And Nietzsche, for example, says that the problem of mankind or the problem of a human being is not that he suffers. The problem often is that he does not know the reason of his suffering. He cannot connect his suffering to a larger purposive goal, which is exactly what I think was Jagat Narayan Lal's issue. He is not afraid. He's almost unafraid and determined to renounce. The renunciation does present difficulties, but very often his dilemmas, his contradictions, his inner torment and trauma is about not knowing what this is all for. We all know that he was part of the national movement, and he has almost assumed a kind of ascetic consciousness, assumed a form of ascetic nationalist persona, and this is drawn, as Manish mentioned, from Gita Rahasya was written by Tilak, was a very huge inspiration. And there are two terms that he uses in Light Unto a Self. One is, which Manish mentioned, which is Sthit Prajna or Pragnya, and the other is Anashrit Karamphal. Sthit Prajna means steady reason. And the reason, as per the Gita Rahasya, or as per the Gita Rahasya is a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, is a reason which is detached from various forms of human emotion. It is steady. It is not linked to anger. It is not related to joy. It is not related to any of the sensory perceptions of a human being. And the other was Anashrit Karamphal, which is that non-desirous action. So steady reason and non-desirous action become the two central themes of not just Life Unto a Self, but also Jagat Narayan Lal's own, let's say, politics, as well as the activity of self-realization. In my book, I have termed this as a mode of ascetic nationalism. And I just want to, I don't want to plug my book in, that's not my aim, but I just want to read a small section which will give you a sense of his fractured psyche, of how he's being torn into different directions. And again, there is a reason why I want to bring this up. Jagat Babu is acutely aware that his quest for asceticism is often marred by weakness and failures. One of them being brahmacharya. He repeatedly says it's very difficult. In failures, perhaps lay a fractured psyche, the suffering, desiring body, the seeking mind, the absent husband, the unconcerned father, the respectful son, the nationalist, the congressman, the Hindu Mahasabhaite, the Gandhian, these becoming the many aspects of his self. Fractured into many selves, the self is no longer self-centered or anchored in its own interests. Jagat Narayan Lal's ascetic self was not just a body that renounced and sacrificed pleasure. It was also a knowing self that forged a relation between itself and the nation it sought to free. So this is how I read the multiple contradictions. This is one reading of how Jagat Narayan Lal's being and his consciousness was fractured into many selves. The other reading that I have, which I read in the context of his other writings, is which is the title of my book, which is Sacred and Political Life of Jagat Narayan Lal. And nothing encapsulates the intersection between two themes than Jagat Narayan Lal's memoir, which was titled, which is under discussion, Light Unto a Self. In Light Unto a Self, we get a glimpse of a constant conflict between a political form of Hinduism and Jagat Narayan Lal's own personal spiritual Hinduism. and the contradictions that filtered into his nationalist politics as a result. So the political form of Hinduism drew him towards Hindu Mahasabha. It drew him away from the Congress, but the spiritual Hinduism constantly made him dissatisfied with the activity or the pursuit of Hindu nationalism. Jagat Narayan Lal, I think, is important not because of the consistency of a nationalist idiom he professed, but the gamut of contradictions he embodied. And I argue that Jagat Narayan Lal is important because he almost reflects the various contradictions and idioms of Indian national movement itself. Reading his memoir with the larger corpus of his writings, it is possible to view his conflicted journey as an archive rather than, and so our attempt should, this is, you all are historians and you know it better than I do, that the task of history should never be to apportion blame or to venerate or to exalt a person. So what I like to see is how Jagat Narayan Lal's experiences, perspectives, choices, politics offers us a lens into a conceptual history of nationalist idioms itself. And I divide it into 4 different nationalist idioms. A political theorist hai, so theory ka thoda bahut kaam will mark my reading of history. So there are 4 idioms that I refer to. The first that I have briefly referred to here, which is the idiom of ascetic nationalism. Gandhi was one of the most prominent of the practitioners of ascetic nationalism in some ways or the other, many others itself. Jagat Narayan Lal's ascetic consciousness drew very heavily from Gandhian modes, but it was different from the self-cultivation of Anushilan that influenced 20th century Hindu nationalist activities. That is the construction of a Hindu male subject poised in a stance of permanent provocation towards the Muslim or the male other. For Jagat Narayan Lal, the search for an ascetic self had far deeper roots and motivations than the instrumentalities of the national movement. That said, Jagat Narayan Lal, Jagat Babu never quite inhabited the ascetic consciousness with the ethical compass of either Mahatma Gandhi or the spiritual depth of Vivekananda. And I'm happy to answer questions on why I think so. The second strand or the second idiom was the Hindu nationalist idiom. And Jagat Narayan Lal's light unto a cell and his other diaries and his letters, etc., help us to understand that not all Hindu nationalist subjects were constructed in terms of another. Some were constructed as a representation of Hindu sensibilities, and they were more sentimental than political. The former, that is sentimental form of Hinduism, often having the tendency to spill into the political in times of heightened consciousness. But yet I think this is a distinction which is worth noting and worth preserving. Also worth notice is that one of Jagat Babu's deepest disenchantments stemmed from the gaping gap he discovers from the promise of political Hinduism and his own personal spiritual Hinduism. The third strand that I read from Jagat Narayan Lal is anti-colonial nationalism. Anti-colonial nationalism is always poised against an other. So in this case, it is the British, and in modern days, it is everybody who is termed as anti-national. But we leave that for the moment. There is a contradiction here too, but I don't want to get into it. This is, in the Constituent Assembly debates, Jagat Narayan Lal has many interventions with respect to citizenship, and he cites examples of modern constitutions in the Constituent Assembly. He has a these are all modern ideas. He has a commitment to free press, freedom of speech, also a commitment, and he draws from Karl Marx as well, a commitment to socio-economic rights. And he says that he wanted the Indian constitution to be ahead of the other constitutions. So so there is an odd mix that you get, and which again reflects the larger idiom of anti-colonial nationalism, which we call decoloniality in modern language, in modern parlance, in contemporary parlance rather. It's an odd mix of wanting to be modern and yet wanting to be Indian. And sometimes, because the whole idea of nationhood is a Western construct, the desire of wanting to be Indian sits very, very uneasily with the desire to be modern or desire to be nationalist. The fourth idiom is that of civic nationalism. Jagat Narayan Lal eventually sought a resolution of his multiple beliefs and contradictions in the ethos of civic nationalism. But even here, there is a conflicted story, because Jagat Narayan Lal chooses this path without being religion neutral. His civic consciousness was never the same as a Nehru or Ambedkar's. Jagat Narayan Lal walked the civic path without being religion neutral. Nehru's embrace of liberal democracy and Ambedkar's of social justice had less ambivalent roots and deeper, stronger liberal roots. Yet, Jagat Babu's conception of citizenship transcending community is closer to Nehru and Ambedkar than his politics would suggest. He chose to uphold many key principles of liberal democratic citizenship, notwithstanding his Hinduness. I just want to quote a very small paragraph and end here. This is from the introduction to my book. I begin quote, most biographies about men or women are about those who loom large and who have impacted the course of history significantly, if not single-handedly. This one, though, is a story of a man who was a participant in history, albeit to an extent that he literally embodied and personified it. It would be fair to say that the main protagonist of the story, Jagat Narayan Lal, my paternal grandfather, is history in person. He stands as his own evidence of a person continuously engaged with the nationalist context and practice, charting pathways, shaping and being shaped by new possibilities of the self and the nation. Jagat Narayan Lal, in Pierre Bourdieu's words, was a collective individual who cannot be summarized in a single narrative or viewed through a single ideological lens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruchishreji. It was a very good analysis. And moreover, being a member of the LA, she showed a historical detachment in describing about things that have gone into the book. Her being political theorist, her analysis was certainly such as may inspire others to read this book, simply because this is not just an autobiography. It is an autobiography of the whole Indian freedom movement in such a brief frame, in less than 80 pages. And from 1927 to 1947, and 1920-21 to 1947, he summarizes things through his own feelings that brings about the best.
That merely it was a kind of very, very atrocious behavior of British administration, which we find in the case of Jagat Narayan Lal. as Maulana Majur Hassan also says, that he's a mental and physical wreck. But why this is done? Basically, the state, any state, when it arrests someone, its basic dream is to break that person, especially if it's political opponent. And we find that political opponent are, they have to suffer this because they want to cut them down through their ego, their mental personality. And that is why this kind of stress is given to personalities. Some of them cope up with it, most of them cope up with it, some of them do not cope up with this. Now this brings me to second point. How our freedom fighters fought this kind of pressure, this kind of punishment. There could have been many ways. One of the ways was obviously prayer and chanting of mantras. And I find it very interesting that it almost takes me to the verge of liberation theology. The liberation theology found that religion can also be a medium of protest. I don't see it as sign of weakness. He did not succumb to British rule. He maintained his grace. He never compromised on his principles. Yet he fought solace. He found solace. He fought atrocities through his method or his tools or his medium of this prayer and chanting of mantras. While many would become mad, he preserved his sanity in a way through this kind of tool. So I find that even liberals should consider, and you should, perhaps I think that somewhere most liberals miss this point, that how religion gives capacity to fight. Religion is not always negative. Either you talk about Desmond Tutu, or you talk about Gandhi, or here in case of Jagat Narayan Lal, I saw that religion was their symbol. It was great strength which can be seen in these political prisoners. So I see it an alternative method of protest. I see not in the terms of just spirituality, but also a medium of protest. How chanting of mantra can be a medium of protest, and how it can be utilized as a tool of political action. Third important point which I feel, a second important point which I feel is his love for Gandhi. Now, he is Gandhian in his sense. And I will take just two examples. One, the kind of, confession he makes about himself is such a truthful thing, that he wants to get married and he doesn't want to get married. He is in conflict for so many times, and he admits it. He could have, hidden it. He could not have written it, but he confesses. And this is typical of Gandhi's experiment with truth, so I find that he is Gandhian in his spirit. The second point I find, his step of establishing an ashram at Vikram. This was typical Gandhian strategy to locate oneself inside a rural community, among the common people, establish some kind of ashram, and propagate ideas, talk to people, have contact with people through those ashrams. So these are two things which I just find indication of his closeness to Gandhian ideas. And this is very important for us. Now, third important point which I find is Congress versus Hindu Mahasabha conflict which he has. And here I would like to just remember that Gyan Pandey and many subaltern historians have pointed out, and in a negative way in some sense, that they see that Indian freedom movement was in a way communal in its essence. They allege that obviously Pant and Govind Ballabh Pant and Malvi and such people, and they were strongest uh, part of the stream of freedom movement. But I find that his conviction to liberal ideas, to democracy is amply clear. And I could read here that in Mahavir, his journal, which was publishing his newspaper, he is talking about how communal situation is deteriorating. In fact, he got his prison term mainly for that he accused that while this government is no is talking about communal harmony, his officers, the officers of the government, are creating dissension and the division and in the society. So I find that he, as Professor Rajshri has marvelously pointed out, and I'm really impressed by her analysis, that it is not a kind of typical Hindu identity which we find in certain political streams these days, but his Hinduism is not against the other, his Hinduism against self-preservation. He is trying to focus on his own community and his own sanskar or his own traditions. That is very important. So I find these are some of the important contributions and the interesting things which I found. And I must congratulate Manish ji that he has taken so much pain in putting it in publication. Both of you are really worthy of praises, that not just because he happens to be your grandfather, also because we need to recreate hundreds and thousands of such stories. We should retrieve stories of other freedom fighters and what kind of sacrifices they have made, what kind of lessons we can learn from their life. And I somehow feel that perhaps we may have to fight another freedom struggle in India to save our democracy. Thank you.
Use of chanting and religious practices, I call it ascetic practices, Pradeep, in my book, how these practices actually could form a idiom of protest, could be a form of protest. And it is very interesting to understand how it becomes a protest, because I tried to deconstruct. मैं भी यही सोच रही थी जब मैं जगत बाबू की मेमो पढ़ रही थी, तो this is what I kept, that such a weak, frail body, a person who's constantly, he is very often narrating. एक डायरी है उनकी, उसमें 3-4 पेजेस तक केवल स्टमक एलिमेंट्स के बारे उन्होंने बात किया है, और मार्जिन में पेट गड़बड़, पेट गड़बड़, पेट गड़बड़, you know. So there's frequent recourse to explaining the suffering. And yet you find that this suffering body is, we can look at Gandhi as well, we can look at all other very frail people, so much so that I find that even the Indian communists in some senses adopted the ascetic practices. If you see communism at a global level, it was always for a higher mode of production, and it had nothing to do with practice of asceticism or religion or even an austere living, but in India it is so. Now, the conclusion I drew was that the ascetic body is a decentered body. It is not self-centered. It's not centered in self. And because you are able to remove the self from you and you are able to constantly achieve a higher form of consciousness, the enemy cannot harm you. The enemy can only jail you. The enemy can only take recourse to certain legal measures or certain physical measures that it has at its disposal. But because the decentered body is just so detached from its own self, it's so detached from its own desires that it becomes a protesting body, because the suffering cannot be inflicted on it the way the Britishers would have wanted it. I just wanted to make that one comment.
Manishji,
I would like to add something to what Pradeep ji was explaining, that he was unafraid. He was a man true to his convictions. His stature was much smaller to Gandhi, but he stood by his conviction. Even, I didn't have the time. When he is reading the Gita Rahasya, now this query comes into his mind that Gita advocates violence for a judicious cause. Gandhiji also talks about Gita, but he advocates ahimsa. So he is not able to reconcile it. But on the other hand, he is more, he supports the commentary of Lokmanya more. So this is a debate, all sorts of debates, contemplations, trying to come to term with his arguments, contradictions. That was the life of this man, the life and thoughts of this man.
He actually, Manish is right. He discards Gita's advocacy of violence as justifiable, as just violence. He, in fact, quotes Aldous Huxley, and he adopts Aldous Huxley and Gandhi's ends and means theory in order to say that means should always be in proportion to ends, and therefore shuns violence as a political recourse.
Ultimately, he says that you cannot, how can you judge what is judicious and what is not judicious? So, taking the path of violence is not for somebody, not for the ordinary. So, it is better to be non-violent.
Sir, it seems we have not other questions. So we can request the chair of the day today to enlighten us.
First of all, let me congratulate Manish ji for bringing out this third edition of Light Unto a Cell by late Jagat Narayan Lal. The book was published way back in 1946, and hardly it became popular. I can't say why. When the book has many things in it that should have made it one of the best sellers of the day. But about that I'll tell afterwards. I begin with one observation, that Indian freedom movement was three freedoms in one, a movement for three freedoms in one. One obviously was freedom from the colonial rule. That needs no explanation. The other was freedom from the multiplicity of divisive forces at work in Indian society, politics, religion, economy, and everywhere, on the basis of caste, creed, community, region, and whatnot. That was perhaps the national movement. We alternately use the two terms, freedom movement and national movement, but actually the Indian freedom movement, in the truest sense of the term, began in 1929, when Lahore Congress adopted the resolution for complete freedom, nothing less. Before that, we had been talking of some share here, some share there, some autonomy here, some autonomy there, nothing more than that. I said national movement, this was bringing everybody together. And this bringing together of all elements of India began right in the first session of the Indian National Congress. in 1885 when the president of that Congress, Vyomesh Chandra Banerjee, declared that all sections of India, all parts of India are represented here right now in this congregation. And this went on until we reached the zenith during the SALT movement. A mention of that is also there in the book. And the third freedom, Gandhi once observed that I do not mind who rules over India, but I do mind if I am not allowed to rule over myself. This personal freedom of conducting myself as I wish, without harming anybody, for the good of everybody, that should be my right. If that right is not given, and obviously in the colonial period, we didn't have that right. In other periods also, we have such situations. I'm not talking of that right now. So the Indian freedom movement was 3 in 1, and Gandhi was best to personify in his personality all these 3 freedoms. And I look now, after having read this Light Unto a Cell, Jagat Narayan Lal as a very worthy successor, as a very worthy follower of Gandhi in all the 3 senses. Now, the second thing, as I said earlier, that while Manish was talking and Ruchishri ji used a very good term, that it appeared that we are rereading the book with him. He made us reread the book, the whole of the book. He reproduced almost verbatim. It was possible because Jagat Narayan Lal was a really learned man. And during our freedom movement, there were any number of learned men, some better known, some lesser known, but Jagat Narayan Lal was one of them, a professor of economics in Bihar Vidyapeeth, a practicing lawyer, a writer, an eminent lawyer, I must say, after having read this book, Light Unto.
A poet also, sir, a poet as well.
Huh?
A poet as well.
Yes, I'm talking of that. I'm coming to that. He was also a poet. And what is beauty about this book is that it is written in a very simple, very fluent, and very faultless English. Simple, I say, that even I could understand it. Fluent, because I read it in one sitting. Interesting, it is all alone. And apart from, as you said, that he was also a poet, he was a freedom fighter, a political leader, a member of the Constituent Assembly, one of the 36 members of the Constituent Assembly from Bihar. And the life that he got, I have already lived more than 8 years. 8 years more than he lived. But what's what? His 72 were worth gold, as every page of Light Unto Cell is worth gold. One thing which I was talking before this discussion started, that he was also member of Dar Commission. Dar Commission, that is linguistic reorganization of provinces. During the freedom movement, there was always a feeling that the British acquired this area or that area and they declared it as a new province. They did not take into account whether this deserved to be a province or not, whether this deserved to be attached to that province or not. They did not take all this into consideration. So Dar Commission in 1948 went into the gamut of things related to this and came out very strongly. And Shri Jagat Narayan Lal had his hand behind that. He had most vociferously pleaded for that linguistic basis of a reorganization of provinces of India may create more problems than solve. So let it be administrative basis. And when in 1953, a larger body was created, the State Reorganization Commission under the chairmanship of Justice Fazil Ali, Jawaharlal himself came forward and said that no, linguistic provinces is no binding principle. They may help us somewhere or other in deciding the boundaries of the states, but not in all cases. Let us stick to the administrative expediency that will help India more. So I again congratulate Manishji for having brought out the third edition of this book with his editorial inputs. And I wish a brief biography could have been added to it. Biography, which we call in Hindi Antarkatha, story inside story. When he refers to that I took a journey to that Sonpur or to Purnia or to that place, what for? What did he achieve out of that? Such things can be brought out by writing that supplementary biography, and that will enhance the value, not actually the value, but that will help people understand the book much, much better.
Thank you so much, sir.
Everybody, almost everybody, all of you have talked about the way he picked up spiritualism in the jail, the way he was put to trouble by the jailer, the way he put up where he procured, somehow he procured a photograph of some god, put it in the wall, on the wall of the cell, and he started fixing his gaze on that photograph and trying to evolve himself from within. And during that period, he kept on chanting Om and other things also. There were other mantras which he also chanted, but Om was definitely the oft-repeated chant. In the jail itself, he read Gita Rahasya, read Upanishads, and many other scriptures and scripture-like books. He read much of Ram Tirth. He read Ram Krishna Kathamrit and such other things. When out of jail, he almost periodically met some or other spiritual person like the Shankaracharya of Sharda Peeth, or Moni Baba, or Swami Ramji of Chhapra. And during the jail, he had also a very good company, though he was in a separate cell. There were some other inmates, the 4 convicts of the Devghar conspiracy case. They were also votaries of violence, which Jagat Narayan Lal or Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi were not. But in spite of that, they were also committed to religiosity, committed to spiritual things, which we best find illustrated in the personality of Aurobindo, himself a revolutionary in his early career, and later turns into an ascetic, turns into a philosopher, a spiritual leader in his own right. So this aspect is very well described by Jagat Narayan Lal when he says that I tried to see what Atma is. Atma, that means the ultimate truth, the truth that must be perceived by piercing through all the illusion, all the maya that surrounds us. So he said there is avidya, which is illusion or maya, but he goes on to explain it. No, avidya is not just avidya. It's not just ignorance. It is also knowledge. It gives us knowledge of many things. As for example, we in history read all histories in class schools, and then early classes in the university. But later on, we start specializing in this or that part of history, and still later, you require to specialize in something which leads you to ultimate truth. That is what uh, Jagat Narayan Lal ji suggests through this particular, and he takes an example out of Chandogya Upanishad, that Rishi Uddalak Aruni told this, explained to his disciple Shwet Ketu about this aspect. And very interesting thing, the jailer who had given him some troubles while in the cell asked some sweeper to close the gate. And he said, for me, the sweeper and you are the same. Doesn't matter whether he closes the gate or you close the gate. This was very hard-hitting thing, but still harder thing that he hit at the jail authorities was when he was released from the jail, he exclaimed before the superintendent, jail superintendent, Mr. Superintendent, I have found my God in your cell. It is there that he had found the God, the strength that comes out of God, the light that comes out of God, the light that he is talking about in this book. Thus, he was a politician who was seeking personal salvation also. This doesn't mean that the two things were opposed to each other. Seeking salvation of the country from colonial rule and seeking your personal salvation, they can go together, as I said just by opening remarks. Now, again, I will like to the dilemma that he had being in Hindu Mahasabha and then being in Congress. The two were not ideologically similar. He made one or two very pertinent observations. They deserve to be observed. They deserve to be understood today. Before I come to that, I may just share with you an experience of mine. A junior friend of mine who resides in USA has written a book, The Islamophobia of the West. He is a medical practitioner, a student of science, and has gathered all sorts of data to prove that the West has perceived Islam very wrongly. Islam is a much better thing. I was also invited in that book launch ceremony in Patna. And I was asked to put forth my views on that. And I said, I beg to be pardoned for this little digression. I said that you are not known because Islam stands for this or that. I am not known because Hinduism stands for this or that. You are known because what you do. Quran might have said many good things. Muhammad Sahab or Hadith might have said many good things. What use if in your personality, in your character, in your behavior, those things are not visible? What use when I say that Hinduism believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, so what? If I can quarrel with anybody for say 500 rupees, what worth is Hinduism for me? My Hinduism should not be known what is written in the Vedas, what is written in the Upanishads. That should give us a strength. That's a different story. My Hinduism should be evaluated on the basis of what I utter, on the basis of what I do, on the basis of how I behave, how I conduct through the society. And even the author of the book appreciated, I don't know what was the, whatever. Now I will quote when uh, Jagat Narayan Lal ji wrote to B.S. Munje, who was president of All India Hindu Mahasabha from 1927 to 1933, and Jagat Narayan Lal himself, all along a member of Hindu Mahasabha, much before. And in 1926, he was also the General Secretary of Hindu Mahasabha. Yet what he writes to, I will not read bigger things, just one sentence out of what he writes. This is very pertinent. When one originally looked to it mana Hindu Mahasabha, when one originally looked to it and worked for the Sabha, we hardly knew that it would take the shape of Muslim League. You can derive your own meaning out of it. I will not impose any meaning. And come into conflict with Congress from time to time. Hindu Sabha coming into conflict with Congress. Why? Because it has taken the root. He remained committed to the imagination of a nation state that was Hindu in its core identity. But he all along had the feeling that India can progress only by taking the path that Gandhi and under his leadership, at least then, Congress was treading. So this is what I had to say. Before I conclude, however, I must thank again and congratulate Manish Sinha for bringing out this book. And as I have given a further task to bring out another edition where certain aspect of his biography that needs to be explained is added by way of a write-up. In brief, not be.
I will be doing it.
Pradeep Kantji, Ruchi Shriji, both of you analyzed things much better. I am perhaps not even worthy of appreciating what you said. You really understood the way Jagat Narayan Lal was trying to evolve himself. And I don't remember exactly, perhaps Tilak had once told him that when you take to spiritualism, it's very pleasant. It will give you great satisfaction, but only very briefly. Soon after, you will find that we are falling back to the worldly ways. So choosing between this and that needs first thing, and that is perseverance. When you have chosen the path of spiritualism, keep yourself always attached to it. The moment your mind takes you other way, stop it and come back to your chosen path. So this is what I could gather both after reading the book and after hearing all of you. And I do not know what is the Thanksgiving program, but at least on my behalf, as the chairman of Shri and also as the chairman of this particular meeting, I must express my gratitude to you all to have come, graced the occasion, and Shri particularly. Shri is committed to discussing such books even in future, and if in any way we might have committed some wrong or mistake, we seek your kind indulgence and keep with us in future also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of, you have already summarized, on behalf of Sri, we'd like to Thank Manish ji for painfully editing and bringing this work in a fantastic way. We thank our distinguished panelists, Rasri ji and P.K. Chaudhary Sahab, for participating and giving interesting reflection on the book. We also thank Dr. Sajjad Sahab, who, in spite of his best effort, could not join us today due to sudden, unavoidable, and pressing meetings at his workplace. He was in constant touch with me on message. We thank our chair, the chair of the day, for his deep, insightful reflection on the work and enlightening us in many other ways, as usual. We thank all the audiences for having patience, and we thank all of you for taking pain, in joining and rejoining. And we really ask for forgiveness for that one. We thank Patron Sri Mr. Mistaji, Secretary Sri Rajesh Samji, other office bearers, members of Sri and sister organizations for making such kinds of events, and the Chairman Sri for making such kinds of events successful and happening from time to time. We thank all of you wholeheartedly, and we expect and we request you to be with us as our chair of the day also requested in future endeavors of